Hi everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be going through three main concepts. Firstly, I'm going to be going through the two different types of nerve fibers that allow for the transmission of pain throughout the body. And on the last slide, I'm going to be introducing you to the concept of referred pain, which is caused by the crossing or passing very close of nerve fibers near the spinal cord, which can cause some sort of confusion for the brain to localize pain to a particular part of the body, and therefore causes for visceral pain to not be localized to an area of the body very well. But firstly, I'm going to be talking about pain transmission and the two main nerve fibers that allow for this transmission to actually occur. The first fiber that I'm going to be talking about is called an A delta fiber. Now, A delta fiber nerve transmitters are defined as mechanical or M-thermal nociceptors. Now, what does that mean? Well, mechanical refers to a type of pain in which the pain is not occurring due to chemical imbalances. So, for example, A delta fibers will not be able to sense if stomach acid changes pH because that's a chemical property. But for example, if the stomach wall undergoes some slit, wound, or hemorrhages, then that is a mechanical damage that is occurring to the stomach wall. And therefore, A delta fibers will be able to pick up that particular stimulus. This is most commonly seen on the surface of the skin because all the exogenous aspects that allow for damage to the skin are going to be usually a mechanical process. So that means that when these particular stimuli cause for damage of the skin, there's going to be activation of A delta fibers to take that pain impulse from the site of pain to the brain. Furthermore, M thermal refers to temperature. So if there is a particular change in temperature, for example, seen with burns on the external surface of the skin, or when you eat something very warm or hot, then A delta fibers will be responsible for the transmission of that pain, or simply if something is hot but not painful, the transmission of that sensation from the site where it is occurring to the brain. Now, the thing about the pain or the type of pain that is sent by these pain fibers is that it is sharp and localized. Now, what that means is that these nerve fibers are able to allow for the localization or the ability to sense a particular location of the pain to be very accurate. So say, for example, if a person is pierced with a pin on the distal part of the fifth phalanx on the hand, then these pain nociceptors will easily know that the pin has pierced the skin on that particular area, as opposed to generalizing the pain to the entire fifth phalanx. This is different to the other fibers that we'll talk about today, which are quite general in their ability to sense pain. Now, since these fibers allow for a sensitization or a sensation of sharp and localized pain, it makes sense that they sense somatic pain. Now, somatic pain is pain that is associated with the ability to, or associated with exogenous agents that cause pain, and it is pain that is characterized by a very particular part of the body being affected. So to reiterate, sharp and localized pain, whenever you see that, refers to somatic pain. In terms of the physical structure of A delta fibers, these fibers are small and myelinated. Now, what does this mean for the transmission of the pain? Well, as we all know, the smaller a particular wire or neuron is, the faster that the ability of a nerve impulse flowing through the neuron is going to be, because the nerve impulse itself has to come in contact with less of the neuron, which means that it passes more faster. Furthermore, since this neuron is myelinated, that anyway is going to be increasing the speed of the nerve impulse. So as you can see, along with the sharp and localized pain, these A delta fibers allow for fast transmission of the pain as well. So in review, when we look at A delta fibers, we can see that they are responsible for sensing mechanical or M thermal pain, so pain that is associated with either temperature or a mechanical stimulus, such as cutting. They are sharp and localized, which refers to a somatic type of pain. And the actual nerve fibers themselves are small and myelinated, which are both qualities that allow for fast transmission of pain throughout the body. The next fibers that I want to talk about today are C fibers. And as I mentioned before, these fibers are quite different to A delta fibers. Firstly, these fibers are referred to as polymodal receptors or polymodal nociceptors. And this is where we see our first difference between A delta fibers and C fibers. As we saw before, A delta fibers are only restricted to sensing mechanical and M thermal pain, whilst polymodal refers to many modes. So C fibers can actually allow for the sensitization to many stimuli, whether that be thermal, i.e. temperature stimuli, mechanical stimuli, chemical stimuli, as well as other changes that may not be able to be sensed by A fibers. So these fibers can be activated by chemicals from damaged tissue, and as opposed to the sharp and localized pain that is caused by A delta fibers, C fibers cause dull and chronic pain. Now, dull is the opposite of sharp, and as you can see, chronic means pain that has been lasting for a long period of time. So as you can see, if you've ever had a stomach ache pain does not simply come and go, like maybe you might experience when you cut your skin. When you cut your skin, usually the pain lasts for a while, and then as the inflammatory processes are occurring, or there is some sort of healing occurring, then the pain slowly subsides. But stomach ache pain is usually quite insidious in its onset, meaning that it doesn't usually start with any stimulus, and it lasts for a very long time. So pain that is dull and chronic and polymodal in its nature is transmitted by these C fibers. So this pain, when we want to draw another comparison between the ability of A and C fibers, this pain is associated with visceral pain. So visceral pain, as the name suggests, is pain that is associated with the viscera of the body, so the internal organs. And unlike somatic pain, which is quite localized and well located, as well as sharp, visceral pain usually spreads around the area in which the pain is actually occurring. And in that case, we can't usually localize it or categorize it to a particular area of the body. And an example of this is once again when we see a stomach ache pain. When you're experiencing a stomach ache, you don't usually say that, oh, I'm experiencing this pain in my descending colon, or on the left side of the body. Usually when you experience a stomach ache, it's localized to the entire stomach, unless that pain is occurring in a particular part of the abdomen. So in that case, the visceral pain is quite broad in its spectrum, and therefore it is not able to be appropriately localized by the body, and there's a good reason for that. And this reason is what I'll go through in the next slide. But going back to the physical structure of these C fibers, there are small and unmyelinated fibers, meaning that transmission speeds are relatively lower. So something that's good that's going for these C fibers is that they are small, so that does increase the ability of the transmission of these fibers. But at the same time, these fibers are unmyelinated, which means that compared to A delta fibers, these nerve fibers are not able to allow for the transmission of pain to the same speed or to the same extent. That essentially means that the onset and the regression of pain, although a minute difference, will be slightly slower than A fibers compared to C fibers. So in review, today we've looked at C fibers as well. And these are polymodal receptors, which means that they are able to allow for the sensitization of pain from various stimuli. They allow for the sensation of dull and chronic pain, which is visceral in nature. And the actual physical structure of these fibers is that they are small and unmyelinated. Alright, so the last concept that we're going to go through today is the concept of referred pain. Now, referred pain is, in my opinion, quite an interesting concept because it allows us to see how the body reacts in pain, and interestingly allows us to observe why certain areas of the body experience pain even though the organs that are associated with causing that pain are nowhere near where that pain is being experienced. So before I move on to talking about the diagram, we'll first talk about what referred pain actually is. So, referred pain arises because in the spinal cord, where the spinal nerves meet to go up to the brain, somatic sensory and visceral sensory fibers actually cross over or pass very closely to one another at the spinal cord. So, to reiterate that, somatic and visceral nerves pass close to one another at the spinal cord. And what that means is that the brain may not be able to differentiate between them and therefore cause for pain to be felt in places where other than the pain originates from. So I'll write that down now, but I think it's better when I explain it using the diagram. So essentially, if you remember in the past, if you call someone on your phone, usually, or sometimes I should say, you would get a cross connection. And that's what essentially is occurring here. The wires or the nerves are passing so close to each other in the spinal cord that there is a cross transmission or a cross connection between these nerve fibers, such that there is essentially the cross transmission of pain impulses between the fibers, which means that the brain gets confused as to where this pain is actually occurring. So the cross connection of nerve fibers confuses the brain. And a classic example of referred pain is when someone is experiencing a heart attack. When a person is experiencing a heart attack, they don't just experience pain in the area of the heart, which is the middle of the sternum, but rather, usually we see clinically that a person experiences pain on their left pectoral area, as well as running down their left arm and going towards their left pinky. And the reason for this is that the somatic sensory nerve fibers that originate from this entire red area here, which is the lateral pectoral area and arm, cross over where the visceral sensory fibers of the heart pass into the spinal cord. So saying that once again, the somatic sensory nerve fibers from the left pectoral region and left arm cross into the spinal cord at the same point at which visceral nerve fibers from the heart come into the spinal cord. And because these two nerves cross into the spinal cord essentially at the same location, they cause for a cross connection or cross transmission between the nerve fibers, which means that even if a person is experiencing pain in the heart, they may not experience that pain to the same extent as they do on their left arm as they do substernally, centrally. So that's quite an interesting concept, and it's something that's interested me for a while, because we can essentially diagnose or allow for an indication of what's going on internally within the body by looking at its outside. So if we start from the top and go towards the bottom and look at the various areas that are affected, we can see also with the lung and diaphragm that it is the neck area that is actually associated with the sensation of pain if those two areas are affected. And that is seen because the somatic sensory nerve fibers of the neck cross over where the visceral nerve fibers of the lungs do in the spinal cord. And that means that there is the sensation of pain occurring where, or there is a cross transmission of pain signals occurring to mean that the sensation of pain occurs in the neck area. The thymus is actually located here, and the pain is translated a bit to the right. The spleen is also present on the shoulder in terms of its pain. As we mentioned earlier, the heart is in the lateral pectoral and left arm region. The stomach is quite similar in its place because it's present around there. It's not moved that much. The pancreas as well is quite similar. The small intestine is a bit moved off because it's usually present around here, but once again it's quite similar. The ovaries are quite similar in their presence. The colon is actually quite different because the colon goes around the entirety of the body, and instead of that round structure, we're experiencing pain in the middle part of the body. And this is commonly usually where people experience a lot of stomach pain. When they say that they're having a stomach ache, they usually may be referring to the stomach itself, but that's quite high up. People usually point to their abdomen. So a stomach ache is usually associated with a colon ache or referred pain due to pain occurring in the colon. Now, what's interesting here is that the kidneys, although they are quite small organs and are located quite high up where the liver is, they actually allow for an area of pain to be quite generalized. So the entire waist area here and parts of the lower limb, as well as the perineal area, is where we can experience pain due to the kidneys. So as you can see, somatic receptors from this entire area are crossing over where the visceral receptors or visceral nerve fibers for the kidneys are crossing over within the spinal cord. And this means that there is a cross transmission of pain within those two areas. The ureter, on the other hand, is the tube that connects the kidneys to the urinary bladder, and that is on this area, which is not where it's present. And if we're talking about the genital organs, then we would expect the ureter pain to be here or here, but as we can see, it's not actually there because of the referred pain concept. And the urinary bladder is somewhat similar on the front, but we wouldn't expect it to be present in the anal area to the same extent because it's more translated toward the anterior aspect of the body. And finally, as we can see, there is the translation of pain of various organs on the back as well. So if a person is having a myocardial infarction, they may complain of back pain as well. Thymus gland is also translated to the back, as well as the liver, gallbladder, stomach, and pancreas. So in this video, we've explored the two types of muscle fibers that we see, sorry, not muscle fibers, nerve fibers that are associated with pain within the body. So these include the A delta fibers, which are associated with somatic and highly localized pain. And we also looked at C fibers, which are associated with visceral pain, and this visceral pain is not well localized to a particular area of the body. And that localization is due to the concept of referred pain, which is when somatic and visceral nerves pass close to one another in the spinal cord and essentially allow for a cross-transmission or cross-connection of the nerve fibers and the nerve impulses, which confuses the brain as to where the pain is actually occurring. So even if, for example, the pain is occurring in the kidneys, the actual sensation of pain is felt in the entirety of the lower abdominal area and the superior part of the lower limb. So I hope today's video has all made sense, and thank you very much for watching.